Is it on? No. We'll fix that. Good morning, Unity of Charlotte. You happy to be here? Good. Let's clap again. Yay. We're happy because we're grateful. We are grateful. And I'm delighted to be with you this morning. My name is Reverend Pat Dre, and it's my joy to celebrate this day together with Unity of Charlotte, where our mission is to nurture a deep and mature experience of God through the practice of unity principles. And simply put, we are here to love, grow, and serve. So this morning, we will start our service by sharing together our statement of oneness, and that will lead us into our opening prayer. Together, there is one presence, one power in my life and the universe, God, the good omnipotence. And delightfully, our daily word is this: take a deep breath and relax in place. And if you'd like, you can yawn, stretch a little bit, and get comfortable. My belief in goodness of the world, others, myself, and God begins with hope. Maybe hope is all I can muster after a period of doubt or disappointment. As I feel hopeful, I begin to believe that new possibilities and better outcomes are available to me. My hopeful feelings lead to faith, a certainty that goodness that I can only sense before is the actual nature of life. With faith, I now direct my thoughts towards goodness, wholeness, and my heart's desire. With gratitude for my awakening, I use faith to dismantle doubt and limitation. I hold only the best thoughts for myself. And I know and feel the depths of my soul that the good I desire is already mine. With unwavering faith and deep gratitude, I claim it right now. For God alone, my soul waits in silence, for my hope is from him. Psalms. You know, I do like to talk about unity principles, and I actually talked about this one several months ago. But just outside of TKK in Fort Mill, they've got a new traffic pattern. Now, you might think that with all the years that we have had roads going from one coast to the other and north to south in the world of roads, that we've learned everything about roads that there is to know. Apparently, that is not so. And so we had a traffic pattern getting on 77 that seemed good for about 25 years. However, they found a new way, and it really works well. Because now, instead of waiting at 3 lights for different levels of traffic to get on or off 77, they found a new way of doing it that is so much smoother. And it is what they call the diamond pattern, which allows you, instead of going back and forth across traffic and trying to beat people out, which is a very bad idea, you now simply go up to a light that leads to a lane that flows so smoothly onto 77, you can't even remember how you got there. And it is creativity that keeps on flowing through the imagination, through thoughts, through creativity, because the creativity of humans is unlimited because it comes from God. And thoughts come into people's minds in ways, and we know this from our own selves, that is extraordinary. It's like, how did I ever even think of this? And it's so much better. But even better than that is those thoughts usually go to more than one human being at the same time. And people then collaborate and they notice the synchronicity of all of it. So there are new ways of going through life. Depend on that beautiful thought form that comes to you from the divine to circumnavigate whatever it is that you face in life. And we're going to be hearing a lot more about that when our speaker comes forth for us, because a lot of the wisdom that we experience right now in our own thought forms and in our own spirituality has also come to people before us. And we're astounded when we compare notes. So stay tuned to that. Thoughts are creative. They come from the divine. Notice your own. It'll help you navigate through life. Now, we welcome all of you that are joining us here today, and I want to extend a special welcome to Joe, who has joined us today. Let's give him a round of applause for being with Unity today. And also for those of you on Zoom and YouTube, another round of applause for all of you who join us in every way possible. If you or anyone you know is in need of prayer, please place your prayer request at the website. We are delighted to pray for any of your intentions or to help you through anything you face in your life. And I always have, because Alan does this for me, an order of service. And we are delighted now to have our choir singing a song. And the following two pieces are going to, they reflect our theme today, which is our Indigenous society here in the United States, our native people in a Cherokee chant. And the words are, I am of the Great Spirit, ho, it is so. I am of the Great Spirit, ho, it is so Great Spirit. So please, everybody stand up. It is a chant, it is easy, join in, raise your vibration. Stand, thank you. Thank you for that beautiful, beautiful piece. Our announcements today. We have our first ministerial candidate, Reverend Dave Hilburn, next Sunday. You're really going to want to be here because in that service and in person and on Zoom, which will be followed by an offsite potluck and a workshop. Now, take note of this, and you can look it up on the link. We are going to be at the Courtyard Marriott in South Park, and the details will be in this week's email. So be sure to join us, not here at the church, but at the Marriott Courtyard.
For lunch and the workshop, we're meeting here.
Oh, for lunch in the workshop, we are meeting here. Thank you for that clarification. So we will see him in person at 9:30
Yep. Here.
at the here. Why does it say Marriott?
That's for the off-site potluck and workshop.
Oh, all right. Now I've got it straight. Thank you. I actually knew it, but I wanted him to say it out loud to make it memorable. That reminds me of Sister Helen Marie in 3rd grade. So that's how she covered up the very few mistakes she ever made. Anyway, to repeat that, the candidate, Reverend Day Hilburn, will be here for the service. And then we are going to go over to the Marriott in the Courtyard Marriott in South Park for our potluck and our workshop. So we are all cool on that. And it's going to be a great event. You're going to want to be there because your impressions of our candidates mean a great deal to our board of directors in their decision making. So I appreciate that. The book club will be meeting on December 19th for the books chosen to discuss books that will be chosen for 2022. Our affirmative prayer meetings meet on Tuesday evenings at 7:15 on Zoom. It is a wonderful way to set your intentions for yourself, for the church, for all of Charlotte, and for our minister choices, as well as the things that we focus on here at Unity, which is the unity of all of life. The Path of Initiation meets on Wednesdays at 1 p.m. on Zoom. And the men's group meets in person at the church on the 2nd and 4th Wednesdays. The Course in Miracles meets on Thursdays at 9:30, and all of those links are at our website. And now together we will say our affirmation for the new minister. Please join me. Together, we affirm that we are calling in and are ready to receive another wonderful minister who is heart-centered, wise, sincere, humorous, collaborative, and who openly walks a spiritual path, love, growth, and service. And so it is. And I am so grateful for all of you who have held this intention for the last year or so to bring it forward, and it is happening now. And now it is my great pleasure to introduce a Unity member for quite a while, who is a deep and wonderful soul, Brenda Duffey. Brenda's work in her life, she has taught for many, many years and brings this gift forward. And when I discovered what her true love and passion at this point in life was, I was astounded. And I begged her for copies of her books. And the first one is The Peacemaker. It is a marvelous book of an extraordinary journey of the native indigenous people here in North America. And it carries the theme through, and it is an epic. It is a saga that has just moved into my heart. There are a few of us here in this congregation who lived near native tribes. I lived literally probably 3 miles from the Onondaga Reservation in Syracuse. And it spoke to us as a people. And I am grateful for all my years living there, because there were many people who had deep spiritual interests who then were taught and trained and lived and absorbed the spiritual training and teachings of the Iroquois. And one of them was somebody who I wish I had met, Houston Smith, who is a great author of religions. He was an important teacher to us in our ministerial, as we were required to read his book. but he has published many books. And in the introduction of his newest book, before he made his transition, he spoke of his time when he was a professor of religions at Syracuse University and said he had to rewrite his book after he spent time with the Onondaga Nation. And it revised his entire thinking of his life's work in spirituality and in teaching. And so with that as my lead, I get an opportunity to introduce this wonderful soul that we call Brenda Duffey for her ability to share what she has done a great deal of research in. I want you to give a very, very warm welcome to our teacher today, dear Brenda Duffey. Did you want me to do this reading before?
No.
Later. Thank you.
Thank you. Put my mask on.
Off.
All totally off. Okay. Thank you, Pat. I was invited here today to speak to you at this Thanksgiving weekend and this time of giving thanks and tied in with the celebration that we have known as Native American Heritage Month, which takes place in November. So I was invited today to give to you my knowledge about the indigenous cultures that lived in North America, especially in the western parts of New York and Pennsylvania, and developed very highly developed cultures that were very peaceful and very prosperous, and for about 300 years until the colonizers came in the 15th century. And so I want to talk about their religion as it related to their worldview of creation and their connections to the spiritual world, and how that contrasted with the worldview of the Western European colonists who came to this country, and the difficulties we've had as a result of that. And one of the big difficulties has been the wiping out of these cultures that had this spiritual connection and wisdom that we are just now learning about and bringing forth in society. And so the indigenous people, and I will focus on the Iroquois Confederacy, the indigenous people that lived in North America had a worldview of creation that life was created by two great forces. And those two forces were the masculine energy that was in the sky, in the sun, the moon, and the stars, and had the power of putting those elements together to create life. And he created life through putting those elements together so that the earth could blossom and grow, and trees could be formed, and animals could live there, and eventually what we know as the humans. And that once he had created that life that was now earth-centered, and not sky-centered, but earth-centered, he needed a way for that life to continue, to blossom, to grow, to be recreated every year. And to grow. And so there was this entity called Mother Earth, which was the divine feminine. And that was the entity that nurtured the soil, that took care of the soil. That the reason that it was called the divine feminine was because when humans are created, the masculine and the feminine get together and develop an embryo, but that embryo is nurtured into life in the womb of the female. And so this is the womb of Mother Earth, which is controlled by the divine feminine. And so with that philosophy that all life had a spirit and all life was important, and it bore the same qualities that existed in all life, and that it was connected to the Great Spirit to grow and to blossom. And so with that in mind, the Iroquois Confederacy was developed around the 11th century, and it was an organization of 5 tribes that came together and decided that they were going to create a great confederacy that would work together instead of against each other. And they based their principles of their government on ownership of land based on land stewardship, not the fact that you could go in and seize it violently and take it, but that you were the stewards of the land and you could live there so long as you took care of the land and nurtured the land. And when you used any of the resources around from the forest or the animals or the trees, that this great law governed what you did. You, in your every endeavor, consider the impact on the 7th generation so that life could continue, could prosper, and that the creation and the recreation of life could continue all the time, and that people could live together. And the power within these tribes was invested in the female because they were the keepers of the hearth. They were the keepers of the home. They were the ones that nurtured the soil and created the crops and prepared the foods and educated the children and actually had the children and bore the children. So all of the property, all of the power was invested in the matrilineal line instead of the male line. And these women also had power in government. Although they didn't attend the councils and negotiate the treaties that were called covenant chains, although they didn't attend these councils, they appointed the men who went to these meetings. And if these men violated any terms of the covenant chain, they were removed from office and a new one was appointed. And the women also had absolute veto over war because they knew the collateral damage from war and what that caused for the family units and the heart of our society. And so they had this view of world that was connected with nature and stewardship and peaceful negotiation, no violence. And they also had this view that their life centered around the position of the sun, the moon, and the stars in terms of growing the things that they needed to grow to regenerate the earth after the winter when everything died. And so they began their planting season was when the sun was at a certain level in the sky, when the moon had its fullness, and when the 7 dancing stars reappeared in the sky. This was a signal it was the time to plant and the time to plant the crops. And they had their religious ceremonies around this. And they had big celebrations when they planted. And all of the marriages were conducted during this time because it was believed that the union would be fertile and blessed by being conducted at this time. And the children were named at this time. All of the children didn't have a name when they were first born. They were named during the time of the planting, all of the children that had been born in the past year. And their names were selected having to do with some event that occurred in nature during the time that they were born, or the position of the stars or the moon when they were born, or some characteristic in their personality that they had that was related to some animal, like the sly fox or the wise wolf or the great bear with a lot of strength. And so they got their names this way. And as the season of planting continued and the crops started to grow, the time came to harvest these crops. And at the time when the 7 dancing stars started to fade and the big harvest moon came out, they knew it was time to harvest these crops. and there was a big celebration and feasting, and it was a religious celebration, a celebration in which offerings were given to the great forces that had blessed them with these crops. And this was the season of gratitude, and they gave thanks. And they said prayers of thanks. That was the main thing during this harvest celebration. Well, the interesting thing was that when the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth Rock, they landed with nothing. They had no food. They were in an area where they had no shelter. They didn't know what they were doing. And ironically, there were these groups of people that had these storehouses of food that they came and shared with them while they were dealing with this difficult winter. And they taught them how to hunt in the forest for what they needed. And they taught them how to plant the corn, beans, and squash that they would harvest and use and store for the coming winter. And when this was over, the Pilgrims actually attended their harvest celebration, which was a celebration of Thanksgiving. Very different from what it evolved in, but they attended that first celebration, which was a celebration of Thanksgiving, and participated with them. But because their worldview of who was responsible for their life and their creation, and the fact that they believed that there was only one group of people that was in charge, that controlled the land, they, after that big Thanksgiving ceremony, they started fencing off the property, keeping the indigenous cultures off the property, hoarding the food that they grew for and collected in great numbers for their people, and actually engaging in war against these people to get them off the land, to kill them. And a big part of that extermination was exposing them to smallpox, which drastically reduced their numbers. And so today, when we Americans have our Thanksgiving ceremony, instead of a time of celebration among the Wampanoag, that is a time of mourning for them. It's a time of loss and grieving what they lost. And but the harvest festivals among the Iroquois Confederacy that is now emerging and getting recognition in the area around New York, where Pat is from, those harvest festivals are still continuing, and they are promoting gratitude, thanks, and the principles of living life to keep it going and to keep it strong, based on taking only what you need, considering the impact on the seventh generation, and living in that manner, and giving thanks all the time for what you have. And so those are the principles of that people. And when we wiped those people out, we lost a very valuable component of their worldview, which was land stewardship. And we are facing today a crisis in our country with climate change because we ignored this idea of land stewardship for the seventh generation. And we are very concerned about this. And one of the things that is coming forth as these indigenous people are getting control of their lands again, that idea of land stewardship, individual life, not necessarily making laws against the big corporations and the fossil fuels, but individual life and living in that manner that honors and stewards the land instead of uses it and takes all of its resources. And so with the rise of these indigenous people who are left, our country is really, really benefiting from that. And that's one of the reasons that I do what I do, is to write and to talk about this and bring that back into our society, that way of living and that worldview, which contrasted very much with the Western European patriarchal society, because what they believed about creation was that there was one masculine God that created the heavens and all the life on earth. And then when he had created all of that, he created a man in his own image who was to control and have power over all of those resources. They had no connection spiritually to the land. They were given that power to control those resources to give God the glory for what they were able to do, because they had this covenant with God and they were ruled by the patriarchs. And they built the United States from sea to shining sea based on that principle. But in the 1840s, as the United States expanded, it became a power in the world and controlled all of the land from the Atlantic coast to the Mississippi River, that mighty river that runs right through the center of this country, and took control of that. They were doing things that some people didn't like, and one of them was the institution of slavery. And so in the 1840s, there began this movement to end slavery. And that movement was actually started by the Quakers, who didn't actually have this idea of divine masculine and divine feminine, but they did believe that everybody was equal and women had as much power in their society as the men did. And they came together to end slavery. But in that movement, there were certain women who noticed or began to think, hey, we're not being treated any better than slaves. We can't own property. And in many cases, we're considered property of our husbands, and they treat us very poorly, especially when they're under the influence of demon rum. And so they came together in 1848 in Seneca Falls, New York, and they wrote their own Declaration of Independence. They patterned it after the Declaration of Independence that set up this patriarchal system in our country. And they declared what their rights were and why they should have them. And the last statement in that declaration is that women should have the right to vote, because these women realized they would never get any of these other things unless they had the right to vote and make decisions about what was done in this country. And that was the beginnings of the women's rights movement, and it was all about the suffragette movement. And as that movement grew and grew and grew, the organizations became more powerful. Although women didn't have the right to vote, they began to get the ear of powerful men like Theodore Roosevelt and Franklin Roosevelt. They had the right to vote then, but, and of course, Theodore Roosevelt set up the national park system. And so they got the ear of powerful men, and certain changes were starting to happen in the country. And we get to the point today where we have this powerful movement called the Blue Surge of 2018, where 100 women were elected to the House of Representatives. And there's this movement to bring about to make changes in the issues that are affecting our country, such as climate change, food deserts, poverty, violence. And so these lawmakers, primarily women, are interested in making changes of that. But the thing that I see in this is that this is still a political movement. It's a political movement, and it's not associated with any church or any religious belief. And the most powerful movement that is resisting all of these changes happens to be the conservative element in our country that still believes that they have this covenant with God and have this patriarchal society, and that's the way that we're supposed to live. So they're resisting all of this change. They're resisting, and they still have this idea of the white Anglo-Saxon male as the person that's supposed to be in charge. And anybody else, any differences? No. And so I want to tie this in now with something that happened in the 1850s on an Indian reservation in northern Minnesota. A young boy named Charles was born, and his mother and father, his father, Henry Fillmore, had built a log cabin, and they were living on this Indian reservation. Well, when Charles was 9, his father left. And so the mother was left on this reservation to rear her child alone. But this Chippewa reservation that had a culture that believed in the power of women and respected the power of women, they incorporated her into their reservation, and she lived there until, I guess, until the end of her life. Charles left as a young man, but Charles spent his formative years roaming around this reservation, learning the ways of this Chippewa people who were part of the, they were part of that branch of the Eastern Woodlands Indians that believed in land stewardship, believed in the power of women. And he learned the Chippewa language. And so he became infiltrated with these ideas about life and creation and how we lived our life, especially the divine feminine. And so when he founded the New Thought church called Unity with his wife Myrtle, this concept entered into the Unity church. And the name Unity was selected because we are all one. We are all connected. We are connected to the earth. We are connected to each other. We are all one, and we need to work together as one. And so the Unity Church has grown under this philosophy, and they've accepted women in their churches at a far greater rate than the men. I don't know if they've not accepted men, but the women seem to be drawn more to the Unity faith because of this, I think. And so as Unity is growing with this idea of unity, with this and accepting of all cultures, accepting of all peoples, bringing in speakers from all faiths to talk, and we see our unity, we see our commonness, and we see the workings of the divine feminine in this. And in 2017, I read a book by Sue Monk Kidd called The Dance of the Dissident Daughter. I don't know if you've read that book, but it's a powerful book. And it's more powerful because Sue Monk Kidd was a Christian author. She was married to a Baptist minister, and she lives in Georgia. And she wrote a book called The Secret Life of Bees. And when she wrote this book, she got the concept of this divine feminine working in nature. And she was thinking about this a lot. And then one day she was going through the grocery aisle with a young daughter, and her daughter bent over to pick up something off the bottom shelf that they wanted. And a man walked past, and he said something to the effect of, "That's the position I like to see women in." And she took that inside, and she went into deep thought about this patriarchal system in the church, and that it was not accepting of females because they didn't accept that power of the divine feminine. And so she wrote this book about the divine feminine and her experience in embracing the power of the divine feminine. And although she's still not as highly regarded among the Christian women of the church, her husband is a minister in the church, and he understands and he supports her. And in their work, they are bringing this idea forward about changing the patriarchal system of the church. And whether we like to think of it or not, our religious beliefs that we hold about how to live life are carried through in our decisions that we make about the government and the things that we do. And the power of the church is very powerful. And if we can get this concept of the divine feminine working, maybe we can start to bring people together on a non-political way and in a spiritual way where they will begin to make decisions of their own free will and not be forced to make these decisions. And I want to end by talking about a woman by the name of Maya Angelou. Maya Angelou is a female author who wrote a book called I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. And it was her story about her experience with sexual molestation when she was a child. And Maya Angelou has caught the attention of, probably in terms of money, the most powerful female in the world, Oprah Winfrey. And the important thing about her having Oprah Winfrey's ear is she's a member of Unity. And she has written many, many things for the Daily Word. She's a big promoter of the Unity faith. And in 1992, she was invited to speak and deliver a poem at President Clinton's inauguration. And I'm not going to read the poem, I'm just going to talk about it, but I do have copies available if you would like them. And she spoke at this inauguration, and the theme of the inauguration was simple abundance. And the old Shaker tune, "'Tis a Gift to Be Simple," was played at his inauguration. This idea of taking only what you need and not building up wealth. And so she delivered this poem. It's called On the Pulse of Morning. And it's a cry to all of the voices of the world, including the voices of nature, and coming together as one, the Asian, the Indigenous people, the African Americans, and coming together as one and speaking out these truths, these spiritual truths that we know. And there, in this poem, she speaks of a rock, a river, and a tree as being involved in this. And it's a very powerful poem. And if you would like, I do have a few copies I made. But I'm going to end with a Unity blessing that I learned when I was the sponsor of my daughter's YOU group in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Many people come to the Unity churches and they look at the congregation and they think, well, those people are past their prime. They're not going to do anything. And what they don't understand is that there is a very powerful youth organization in the Unity system, and it's very highly organized. They hold regional rallies where the youth actually take control of the rallies. They set up all the meditations, they set up all of the themes and everything, and they learn to be leaders. And then once a year, they can attend the international rally that is attended by youth of Unity in other countries as well as the United States. And they're very powerful. You talk about 1,000 young people coming together and learning the Unity principles. And so I'm going to end with this blessing that I learned, and I'm going to have to put the mic down. We love you, we bless you, and we truly appreciate you. Namaste.
That was so, so beautiful. That contains so many beautiful messages that are both in alignment with what Unity teaches, but so profound because we are remembering, as Brenda has reminded us, that it was the beginning of life on this continent and contains so many things to live by. And I was so deeply touched by the idea to remember who is responsible for creation. and to remember how important the combination of the divine feminine and the divine masculine are together to produce life on this plane, the embryo that is nurtured by the womb of Mother Earth. And to remember that I take only what I need, and that everything that I need will be supplied to me in ample quantities for my life, and that so it is for all, as we have learned from your talk. Thank you very much again, Brenda. Beautiful. And so seamlessly, we move into our offertory, where we have the opportunity to practice circulation. And we remember all of the good that we have. And I start really by offering you an important quote from the Shawnee chief Tecumseh about the importance of giving thanks each day. And what a powerful idea that is, to live every moment of your life in thanksgiving. When you rise in the morning, give thanks for the light, for your strength. Give thanks for your food and for the joy of living. If you see no reason to give thanks, the fault lies within yourself. So grateful for all of that. Join me in our prosperity blessing. Joyously, I give this gift, knowing that the divine presence blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive. Thank you, God. And if you have received messages today that are important to you, please let that be reflected in how you live your life now and in the days to come. And now I turn to our choir. It's Brenda singing her solo. Oh my goodness, how wonderful for that. Over to you, Brenda. I already.
You think you own whatever land you land on. The earth is just a dead thing you can claim. But I know every rock and tree and creature has a life, has a spirit, has a name. You think the only people who are people are the people who look and think like you. But if you walk the footsteps of a stranger, you'll learn things you never knew, you never knew. Have you ever heard the wolf cry to the blue corn moon, or ask the grinning bobcat why he grins? Can you sing with all the voices of the mountains? Can you paint with all the colors of the wind? Can you paint with all the colors of the wind? Come run the hidden pine trails of the forest. Come taste the sun-sweet berries of the earth. Come roll in all the riches all around you, and for once, never wonder what they're worth. Have you ever heard the wolf cry to the blue corn moon, or let the eagle tell you where he's been? Can you sing with all the voices of the mountains? Can you paint with all the colors of the wind? How high does a sycamore grow? If you cut it down, then you'll never know. to the blue corn moon for whether we are white or copper skinned. We need to sing with all the voices of the mountains. We need to paint with all the colors of the wind. Try to the blue corn moon for whether we are white or copper skinned. We need to sing with all the voices of the mountains. We need to paint with all the colors of the wind. You can own the earth and still all you'll own is earth until you can paint with all the colors of the wind.
And this is what I know right now. We have been painted by Brenda Duffey with all the colors of the wind. And I hope you take that with you today. Thank you so much for all of your gifts. That's the beginning. Let's go to the end. Here we go. Today, we will be opening up our community room in the back. We'll be unlocking it. And it's okay. And please join us afterwards. We'll have a nice chat. I was on a vacation last week, but the week before we had an absolutely marvelous discussion and I could hardly tear myself away from it. It just was so invigorating. So please join us again for that kind of a discussion. Looking forward to it. What we do at the end of our service, as you all know, we quietly take our chairs to the side, and those that are getting their workout, we'll call this Unity Fitness time. You can stack those chairs and then just walk through to the community room and chat with us for whatever time you've got, a few minutes or longer, whatever you choose. I want you to join us in our prayer of protection, and then we'll move into our peace song. So join with me. The light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. The presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well. Join us, stand up for our song, our peace song. Thank you.
God
And stop recording. Stop recording. Hold everything and stop recording somehow. Stop.